We are leaving Santa Rosa Island and headed for Catalina. But first, let's take a tour of the American Pride ship and a charting lesson.
Hi guys, I'm Daniel with the Los Angeles Maritime Institute. Today we'll be charting our course from Santa Rosa Island to Two Harbors on Catalina Island. We'll be using this chart. A chart is a nautical map. Maps are pictures of the land, while charts are pictures of the water. In addition to the chart, we'll also be using a pencil, a divider, and a parallel ruler. Let's get started. We'll start by drawing a line between the two islands, making sure we don't hit any land on the way. This line will help us calculate the course, or the degree at which we need to sail in order to get to Catalina. And we'll just turn in here and come into Two Harbors. To determine the course, we'll put the ruler on the line we drew between the two islands and then move it to the nearest compass rose printed on the chart. On this chart, that's right next to the line we drew. Where that line falls is the degree we need to steer, so our course for this trip will be 109 degrees. The compass rose we use is a circle with 360 degrees. As you can see a little more clearly here, we just move this parallel line up to the middle of the compass, and that tells us what our compass should read as we sail to Catalina. Now, we want to use this line we drew to determine how far we're going to travel. We're using nautical miles rather than miles, and they're a little bit different. Each nautical mile is equal to 1.15 miles. Each degree, or line of latitude, is equal to 60 nautical miles. Each degree of latitude is also split up. It's split up into 60 sections. Each of these sections is called a minute of latitude. So there are 60 minutes of latitude for every degree. On our chart, each minute of latitude is equal to 1 nautical mile. Since our journey is pretty long, we'll be measuring by groups of 10 nautical miles. So we'll take our divider and measure out 10 minutes of latitude, which is equal to 10 nautical miles. Okay, so let's take our divider and walk it out. We got 10 nautical miles, 20 nautical miles, 30 nautical miles, 40 nautical miles, 50 nautical miles, 60 nautical miles, 70, 80. So for this last little bit, we'll measure out distance into Two Harbors, and then take that over to our lines of latitude. Count it out, it looks like it's about 7 minutes of latitude, or 7 nautical miles. So, for us to get from Santa Rosa Island to Two Harbors at Catalina Island, we're going to set a course of 109 degrees, and we're going to sail for 87 nautical miles. Thanks for helping us chart our course.
Hi, my name is Carolyn, and I live and work on the big boat that is right behind me. The boat's name is American Pride, and we are docked in Long Beach, California. The boat is 130 feet long and about 100 feet tall, and we take kids out sailing, teaching them about the ocean. So today we're going to take a quick tour of the boat and see what's on board.
So we're going to start our tour up here at the bow, which is the front of the boat, and then work our way aft, and then we'll take you down below decks. So what you just saw was the bowsprit, which extends over the water and has 2 sails attached to it, the outer jib and inner jib, followed by the staysail. And then on either side of those sails, we have 2 anchors that weigh 500 pounds, and there's a windlass in the middle which pulls them up. And what you are seeing here is one of the 3 steel masts that we have on board. These go from the very, very bottom of the boat to the very, very top, about 100 feet in the air, and this is what our sail is raised on. So I just wanted to review some parts of the boat before we keep moving forward. So like I said, the front of the boat is called the bow. The back of the boat is called the stern, and we have 3 triangle sails called the outer jib, the inner jib, and the staysail, moving from the front to the back. Okay, and then on deck we have some kayaks, we have a small boat, all for fun at the islands and when we have summer camps. You also see these little cabin houses which take you below decks, which I'll show you in a minute. And here's Daniel just hanging out, chilling on deck in a hammock. So right here in the forward midships area, we do have 2 guns on board that we use for parade sails and battle sails. So they do work. We don't put cannonballs in them, but we do put a charge made out of tin foil and black powder. So you can see above me that there were some more sails. These are our square or gaff rig sails. There are our foresail, our mainsail, and our mizzen sail, and they're all pulled up the same way with 2 halyards, the throat and peak, all the way up the mast about 80 feet in the air. Okay, now we're heading to the back of the boat. This is where the wheel is, so we're heading back to the area where we steer the boat from. Okay, so this is the wheel that we use every time we go out sailing. A lot of people do ask why the wheel is at the back of the boat. Well, the wheel moves the rudder, which is a giant fin at the back of the boat, so they need to be close together. You also see here our compass or our binnacle, which shows us which direction we're going. Now we're going to start our below deck tour, so we're going to start with the aft cabin. The aft cabin is where the captain sleeps. It also has 1 other pull-out bed for any other crew member joining us on a voyage. The aft cabin is also where we keep a lot of our navigation equipment. So you see a computer there. We do use a computer to help us navigate, but as we pan around further, and I'll go into a little detail later on, but we do use paper charts, chip logs, sextants, some of the more traditional tools. Before I go into those more traditional things we use for navigation, I will pan up and show you our whole basically wall of electronics that we use for navigating. These are all of our radios, our AIS, our depth sounder that we use for sailing the boat. So here we have the charts that we use every time we go out sailing. These are the most reliable thing. We use them to get from point A to point B. We also have a chip log, which helps determine the speed of the boat, as well as the sextant, which helps us use the sun and the horizon to find where we are, where our location is. Okay, now we're going to head into our galley and our crew quarter or engine room, but I'm going to break it up into a few slides and just show you the galley in this one, which is our boat kitchen. Our galley on board is very similar to your kitchen at home. It has a stove, a refrigerator, a coffee maker, a sink, and it's where we prepare all of our food. The biggest difference between your kitchen and our galley is really that we have to conserve food and water a lot more. We can't just go to the grocery store at any point, especially when we're out sailing, to get food to restock. Same with water. We don't have a water maker on board, so we do have to conserve water that we have. So we've actually headed into the crew head or the bathroom. So we have a little sink and a little toilet, and it is different than your toilet at home because everything is actually kept on board. We can't just release it to a water treatment plant. We also can't just release it into the water. Now we're going to check out the crew quarters where the crew lives. So in the crew quarters, we do have this giant table, which is great when we hang out, when we play board games, when we eat breakfast. We also have a TV when we're at the dock. And surrounding the table are some bunks, which is where the crew sleeps and has all their possessions. Our crew quarters is actually also our engine room. So in the giant table where we sit and hang out is our engine and generator. So it actually lifts up and you can see both the engine and generator right there. Next, we'll head to the compartment that we call the main. When American Pride was built in 1941, she was built as a fishing boat. So this would have been the area where the fish were stored. There would have been a hole on deck and they would have just thrown all the fish down into this compartment. Now it is where kids stay when they come with us for voyages. And the last compartment we'll explore is the forecastle. Right now we still are in the main. You can see there are 2 heads up forward, and there's this giant bulkhead door which leads to the forecastle. So this giant door will prevent water from going from one side to the other if we were bringing on water. And as we open the door, you see the forecastle, which is 16 bunks used for students.
Thanks for joining us on the boat tour today. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos. It is Tall Ship American Pride.
Next, we'll be sailing to the Bolsa Chica wetlands on the mainland, but first an explanation of what a marine protected area is.
California's 1,100 miles of shoreline contains some of Earth's most remarkable ecosystems and wild creatures. Most, however, are rarely seen by those who live here, even though the Pacific Ocean is an essential part of their life. From the air we breathe to the food we eat, the ocean is a source of energy, transportation, climate, recreation, and the latest scientific discoveries of the deep. Its waters connect California to the world. And while some of these shores are pristine and wild, others are seriously threatened by increasing human impacts. These are real problems requiring real solutions. What is one tool being used to create a more resilient ocean in the face of many threats?
The Marine Protected Area Network in California is the largest continuous network of marine protected areas in the world. The network as a whole is 124 MPAs from border to border, from California-Oregon border down to the California-Mexico border.
So a marine protected area are defined areas that have some kind of regulation that limits human activities of some kind.
The way that we basically explain it is MPAs are like, national or state parks, but underwater. It's to protect the wildlife, the archaeological features, the geological features in that area.
In the case of California's MPAs, those protections include prohibiting or restricting fishing, collecting, and in some cases, even getting too close to offshore rocks.
There are 4 focal points for managing these marine protected areas: enforcement, monitoring and research, permitting and policy, and outreach and education. So together with our state and federal partners and our community partners, we are working together to manage this network to the best of our ability as we go forward.
The reason that we have 124 of these marine protected areas instead of, let's say, 2 or 3 is that it was the vision of all the stakeholders and all the people who care about the ocean to improve the resources from the Oregon border down to Mexico.
And this is huge because typically for fisheries management, we target single species. MPAs are unique in that you can actually protect the whole ecosystem, all the species that inhabit that ecosystem, how they interact with one another. And because of that, the larvae produced in each of those smaller protected areas are going to replenish populations along the coast from one protected area to the next. Now you're bathing the populations up and down the coast with larvae that are being produced in those protected areas.
And the whole idea of these marine protected areas is when you get that productivity, the fish don't sit there along that line. They go outside the line. Guess what? Fishermen have the opportunity to catch those fish. And that's absolutely in the plans for this whole process.
The MPA is like a savings account. If I want to be sure that I have something in the future, I need to put a little bit aside today. And that's a really small price to pay to be assured that my grandkids are going to be able to fish like I've fished. The design of the MPAs, they really were taking into consideration not only the science of habitat preservation and the environmental concerns, but also how do we make these things work for the other stakeholders that are also involved. So I think the marine protected areas can increase our opportunity rather than decrease it.
There again are different flavors of protection. We have those no-take marine reserves that exclude any kind of take of any species. But then there's conservation areas that will in fact allow some take of some species.
There are also state marine parks, state marine recreational management areas, and special closures.
One of the major partners that the state of California is working with is the MPA Collaborative Network. And that is a group of 14 different individual community groups coming together to help with the localized MPAs within their geographical region that they're interested in.
The MPA Collaborative Network is the grassroots effort to empower coastal communities to take on the stewardship of their local marine protected areas. We bring together the enforcement aspect, allied agencies, officers, people trying to gain compliance, bringing them together with the research side of things and the monitoring, so scientists, citizen scientists, people doing research out in the field, together with all the groups doing education and outreach.
That's what makes this network so unique, is that it really truly was a public-private partnership with the state of California and the citizenry to put this in place.
As the state park interpreter here at Point Lobos State Natural Reserve, I'm tasked primarily with the long-distance learning program. We call it the PORTS program, Parks Online Resource for Teachers and Students. And I get beamed into classrooms throughout California and beyond to teach students about the kelp forest as well as our marine protected areas, our MPAs. What do you think that this kelp bug eats?
Is it kelp?
That's right.
I think marine protected areas are essential for the community to really get engaged in these protected areas and to learn about them. We take students from underserved communities that have never been to the ocean sometimes. It's incredible, but even if they live in San Diego, they've never been to the ocean, and they come in and they see a sea lion for the first time while kayaking, and they get that love and appreciation for these areas. We know that we're building the next generation of ocean stewards.
After years of protection in California, some Channel Islands MPAs indicate we're on the right track and have shown measurable increases in populations. Rick Rosenthal is an Emmy Award-winning cinematographer and marine biologist who has filmed in ocean waters around the globe, including some of the world's most pristine MPAs.
So my professional background as a wildlife cameraman, filmmaker, as well as a biologist, has taken me a lot of places in the world. I get the opportunity to film, to dive, to interact with people, to be with fishermen, to be with kayakers. So in the last 50 years, I've seen a lot. So when I came back to the Channel Islands, places I dove as a boy or as a young biologist, and you know what? A few of those areas actually looked better on the bottom. We were seeing lobsters come back, abalone, big fish. We're seeing the big sea bass we hadn't seen in decades. And to be right off the beach here and be out in the Channel Islands and to see all this wildlife, you can't do that in other places in the world. Not with this much diversity, not with that many surprises around the corners. And to swim through a kelp forest is still magical. Well, to grow up in California, but to come back, I feel proud that I'm on the California coast again.
We've got these national treasures that are off our coast. We've got incredible productivity for years and years. But the fact is, these areas have been in trouble. So now we're saying, let's be prudent. Let's have some areas that we're going to put aside. It's for current generations, but really it's for future generations. I want my grandson to see a fish off the coast of California.
California's marine protected areas are very much like national or state parks, special places set aside to protect precious resources and to protect the incredible diversity and abundance of our marine heritage for this and future generations.
Since 1976, the Amigos de Bolsa Chica have been committed to protecting our local wetlands and serving our community. Since the founding of our FLOW program, we have served thousands of students, educators, and the community at large by offering free naturalist guided tours, hands-on education programs, as well as other volunteer activities. For that reason, we've decided to offer alternative methods of serving our community, including this video that you're watching right now. Today we'll learn about the Bolsa Chica Ecological Reserve, but first let's go over safety when visiting Bolsa Chica. Please remember to maintain social distancing while on the trails of Bolsa Chica. Some of our trails are wide enough to allow a 6-foot distance between yourself and others. Some trails, however, are more narrow, and it is common courtesy to step aside and allow others to pass, or you can avoid these trails and stick to the wider path. Please wear a mask at all times, making sure both your mouth and nose are covered. Dogs are not allowed at the Bolsa Chica Ecological Reserve, whether or not they're on a leash, as they disturb the wildlife. Remember, this is an ecological reserve, not a park. Please hold on to all trash until you get to a waste receptacle at the parking lots. Any trash left on the ground has an effect on the wildlife. Please remember to stick to the trails and do not trample any of the plants. Remember, this is a home for these plants and animals, and we want to protect our wild spaces as best we can. Now you're ready to experience Bolsa Chica in a safe and respectful way. Let's get to the video.
Hi, my name is Jen and we're at the Bolsa Chica Ecological Reserve here in Huntington Beach, California. Today, you and I are going to be learning about the plants and animals that call this place home.
Hey Jen, my name is Amber and I'm the Amigos de Bolsa Chica FLOW Program Manager. You guys ready to go? Awesome.
So for starters, what exactly is the Bolsa Chica Ecological Reserve?
Bolsa Chica is a 1,200-acre coastal wetland, and this is a special and increasingly rare area. Most wetlands along our coast have been turned into harbors or marinas, or even housing developments. Although it may not look very important at first glance, I invite you to take a closer look. Bolsa Chica provides open space and trails for people to walk, to observe, and to enjoy nature, which also makes it a great outdoor laboratory for scientists and educators. The wetland ecosystem purifies and filters water and provides sediment traps and erosion control during times of heavy rain. It also serves as a nursery for fish. Up to 50% of all commercial fish species spend some point of their lives in coastal marshes because they were protected from the ocean waves and from predators. It provides habitat for migrating, wintering, and breeding birds. Bolsa Chica is also a stopping point on the Pacific Flyway, and since there are fewer stopping points, the birds need the ones that are left, and therefore restoration is very important. Bolsa Chica also provides food and home for endangered species. All of this makes Bolsa Chica a natural repository for many native birds, plants, and animals, which helps to preserve California's biodiversity. And in terms of photosynthesis and the production of oxygen, all of those ingredients make Bolsa Chica as productive, or even more so, as a tropical rainforest.
That's very interesting. So there are definitely some plants here, but it doesn't look like enough to put the same amount of oxygen as a rainforest.
That's a great observation, Jen. Our climate here in Southern California is definitely too dry for a rainforest. And it is true Bolsa Chica doesn't cover as vast amounts of land like it used to. But this location provides some unique ingredients that make wetlands like Bolsa Chica extremely productive. There are many elements that go into a healthy ecosystem, both living and non-living. The prominent non-living parts of the Bolsa Chica wetlands are the sun, salt water, fresh water, air, and mud. The mud is composed of soil carried into the marsh by rainfall draining off of the upland slopes, and something that's called detritus, which is decaying plant material. When the salt marsh plants shed their leaves, layers and layers of decomposing organic material accumulate, and that is detritus. That detritus is composed mainly from carbon, and the soils and plant root systems hold onto the carbon in massive amounts. When the wetlands are disturbed, say someone comes in and develops it into a neighborhood, then that stored carbon is released back into the atmosphere and further accelerates climate change. It is critical to keep plant carbon sequestered in its original state in the mud. The living parts of Bolsa Chica include birds, fish, invertebrates, and plants. Of these components, the plants are the most important to the ecosystem. They are called primary producers because they can make their own food from carbon dioxide and water, using the sun's energy. This process is called photosynthesis, and one important byproduct of photosynthesis is oxygen, And this is the main reason why the salt marsh here is as productive as a rainforest, because it isn't only the plants that we see that produce oxygen. Phytoplankton are microscopic plant-like organisms in the water that rely on photosynthesis, taking in carbon dioxide and producing oxygen just like larger plants. In fact, phytoplankton are critical to life on Earth and produce up to half of the oxygen that we breathe. This is where the food chain, or the flow of energy, starts. Plants and phytoplankton convert sunlight and carbon dioxide into energy. Phytoplankton, algae, and the bacteria produced by the detritus feeds amphipods, copepods, jellyfish, shrimp, worms, clams, mussels, and small fish. These in turn are eaten by many species of birds and larger fish. The larger fish are eaten by other birds and people too. Every plant and every creature has a role in the chain. All of the interactions between them mean that Bolsa Chica has a tremendous amount of biodiversity. In addition to all the salt-tolerant plants and phytoplankton, there is another very abundant plant in Bolsa Chica called eelgrass, which grows in the shallow tidal water. This plant adds nutrients to the system, including oxygen, and because Bolsa Chica's waters are protected from the ocean waves and currents, it shelters many species of growing fish, just like a nursery.
So, from what I'm hearing, there's a lot of fish here too?
Yes, actually. Coastal wetlands are nursery grounds for commercial fish. Half of all the fish that we eat spend part of their lives here. They are dependent upon the eelgrass, the calm and nutrient-rich water, and the food that they find here before they can venture out into the ocean. These fish include bass, corbina, anchovies, mullet, and halibut.
That's really cool. So tell me more about the other creatures you mentioned living in Bolsa Chica's water.
If you're standing on the walk bridge, some of the aquatic creatures you may see include several members of the shark family, including the leopard shark or the shovel-nosed guitarfish. You might also see several types of rays, including the common stingray. At the water's edge, you may find many species of invertebrates like crabs, clams, snails, mussels, and oysters. In deeper water, you might find shrimp, or see a two-spot octopus, or a California sea hare. Sometimes we'll even spot sea lions and green sea turtles in Bolsa Chica's waters.
Someone told me that there were dinosaurs here. How is that possible?
In a sense, yes, there are. While all the dinosaurs as we know them perished 66 million years ago, one tiny branch of the dinosaur family survived, and that's birds. Starting with only a few species of birds, those that survived the mass extinction responded to their changing environments and over millions of years adapted into countless shapes and sizes to fill almost every kind of habitat on Earth. There are now 10,000 species of birds on Earth, and every bird has different adaptations that allow them to survive and to move around when their food sources move. Birds that live in the salt marsh here are especially adapted to eat the fish, crustaceans, and aquatic plants that live in the water, and the invertebrates that live in the mud. The more birds you see means the more food there is for them and the healthier that the habitat is.
Well, there are definitely a lot of birds here at Bolsa Chica. What kind of birds live here now?
We actually get over 200 bird species at Bolsa Chica throughout the year. A lot of birds live here all year long, wading birds like herons and egrets, and birds of prey like falcons and osprey, and the Canada goose as well. But we also get a lot of migratory birds. Bolsa Chica is an important stop on the Pacific Flyway, which is a migration pathway between Alaska and Canada, down along the coast of the Pacific Ocean to South America. There are many species of ducks and shorebirds that raise their young far to the north and arrive here in Bolsa Chica in the fall and then return north in the winter. Some birds, like swallows and terns, spend their winters in Central and South America where it is warm, and then arrive at Bolsa Chica in the spring to raise their young. All of these birds travel huge distances to find healthy habitats that provide the food that they need and the places they need to raise their young. There are also a few species of endangered birds here at Bolsa Chica. There are not very many of these birds because their habitats have been developed by people. This means that they don't have access to the natural resources they would need to survive. These birds include the least tern, which likes to nest in open and sandy areas like beaches, Belding savanna sparrow, which nests only in pickleweed, and Ridgway's rail, which feeds and nests only in the salt marsh amongst the cordgrass. Only 10% of California's coastal wetlands remain. The rest have become farms, harbors, marinas, and beachfront houses, meaning that these species are struggling to survive. But there are some success stories too. The brown pelican and the peregrine falcon almost became extinct when a pesticide called DDT worked its way into the food chain and caused their eggshells to become too thin and the eggs to break when the parents tried to incubate them. But when the government banned the pesticide, the birds' numbers gradually increased, and we can thank the Endangered Species Act for saving them.
Can you tell me more about the plants we're seeing? Are all of these native?
Yes, most of the plants here are native, except for a few weeds you might see among the perimeter of Bolsa Chica. These plants here are all uniquely adapted to the salt marsh ecosystem and will only be found in similar conditions. While the land may look pretty flat here, the daily fluctuation of the tides creates very distinct areas for different communities of plants. The marine zone, where you'd find eelgrass like we talked about earlier, is always underwater no matter the tide. The next zone is the coastal salt marsh. This zone gets submerged twice a day by the rising tides and then drains as the tide recedes. Plant species in this community must adapt to different amounts of water and salinity depending on where they are located along the gradual slope of the marsh. Those in the lower regions are especially challenged because they must adapt to soils which have a high concentration of salt, are poorly drained, and have little to no air. The most common plants here are cordgrass, pickleweed, and saltwort. Cordgrass has developed a regulatory system by excreting extra salt out of its leaves. Pickleweed is able to concentrate salt into the tips of its stems and then drops those stems to the ground before it regrows them. The next zone is the coastal strand that you might see along the trail next to Pacific Coast Highway. This is an area of flowering plants that live along the shore in loose, shifting sand above the high tide line. These plants are subjected to daily salt spray, strong winds, and intense sunlight at various times of the year. Plants in this community must adapt to salty soils with low nutrients and very little water. In fact, most of these plants get their water from the fog that rolls in off the ocean at night. And the last zone is the coastal sage scrub. This is the zone that you see up on the mesa, and most of these plants are drought deciduous, meaning that they lose their leaves and look dormant or dead during the hotter summer months. When we have cool, rainy weather during the winter, they sprout new leaves and flowers.
Well, thank you so much, Amber, for showing us around the Bolsa Chica Ecological Reserve. I had no idea there was so much going on. It's really cool to learn about what's going on beneath the surface, but just how everything is connected.
Yeah, and thank you so much for joining me. And thank you guys. If you're interested in learning more, if you want to explore with us in person, visit us online at amigosdebolsachica.org or follow us on Facebook and Instagram. See ya.
Next week, we will travel to the Newport Back Bay Science Center, where there is an outdoor learning environment where students can study the birds, fish, and plants that live in this marine protected area and visit the Wrigley Marine Science Lab on Catalina.